lift up my voice and raise it high, telling the stories of your children's cries. For our ability to survive the onslaught of the enemy's drugs, guns, and alcohol, his prisons and his killing fields, depends directly on whether you are willing to stand up and resist the outrages that are being heaped upon us as a people and build a new society. Yes, the task is difficult. The odds are against you. But you must organize to find a way or make your own way. You must change today so that tomorrow may dare to be different. And when you have fought back and regained your pride, when you have won some battles, when you are able to tell the stories of your heroism, when you can pass on to your young the tradition of struggle through examples of your having stood up for a better tomorrow, when you take control of our institutions, our media, our schools, when you maximize our economic resources towards our own benefits, when you stop making excuses, when you start standing with our mothers, when you stick it out with your families, when you start mentoring our young, when you start teaching us to be humane, then we can build a new nation of strong people. Your sons and daughters will no longer need to belong to gangs because they do belong. Our youth will no longer be seeking drugs as an escape because they would have outlets in our society to develop themselves. When you start setting the conditions for our youth to fulfill their humanities, then we will not be in despair. We will be whole, complete, and hopeful. My fathers, you must shape the vision of tomorrow. But in order for that vision to become a reality, you must rededicate yourself to a new beginning. Go back to your families. Go raise and teach your children. Go back and organize throughout this nation to bring about a better day for our people. Our enemies can destroy us one by one, but no one can stop 1 million men organized and committed. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Allende Jean-Baptiste. That was the young man. I guess now he'd probably be in his 40s or maybe even 50s, I guess. But that was Allende Jean-Baptiste, who was at that point the young man at the Million Man March from 1995. The song in the intro, You Will Know, by Black Men United. It was a collaborative effort for the Jason's Lyrics soundtrack, which, you know, in my mind, I always associated with this event, the Million Man March, because it came out right before that. I had no idea until this week that that was written by a young D'Angelo. So just another, another classic song written by one of our great, brilliant men. But we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. That's 92.7 in the FM dial. It is 7:43 in the PM, so I'm going to have to get out of here in about less than 20 minutes. But before I go, it's time to go back to the future, back to 1995, because this week in 1995, the Million Man March took place. Really, allegedly around 800,000, but you know, who really cares? The Million Man March took place on October the 16th of 95 in Washington, D.C., and was one of the largest public demonstrations in American history. It was organized primarily by Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, alongside Benjamin Chavis from the National African American Leadership Summit. Also, the Nation of Islam, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, involving its local chapters. So many people were involved in helping to make this event. I remember it like it was yesterday. My mother specifically held me out from school that day so I could watch this event. And I just remember how inspiring hearing speeches like that from young Mr. Baptiste was. And we just had so much optimism coming out of it. And so, because the mid-90s were a really hard time in American history. I always tell people, if you listen to this show regularly, one of my favorite topics to talk about is crime. And crime during that era of the mid-90s was the highest it had ever been. I think 1993, if I'm not mistaken, was the most violent year ever recorded in American history. 1994 was the year of the Clinton crime bill of mass incarceration that people like Jesse Jackson warned us would do exactly what it did, which would be essentially an excuse to give our government to the ability to lock up as many black men as possible. So you would see stuff like that. The march took place in the context of the grassroots movement of that time period, and also as a reaction to the 1994 sweep into power that the Republicans had on the backs of, well, white male grievance. Good to see that nothing has changed over the last 30 years, but hey. And so in the context of this, it was supposed to be about a consolidation of black power. Black people were encouraged to stay home from school, from work, and social engagement in favor of attending teach-ins and worship services, focusing on the struggle and self-sufficient black community. Now, at the time of the march, black Americans actually faced unemployment rates nearly twice that of white Americans. Good to see nothing has changed. A poverty rate of 40%, a median family income that was about 58% of the median for white household. More than 11% of black men were unemployed. And for those between the ages of 16 and 19, the number of unemployed had reached over 50%. According to Jesse Jackson's speech at the march, the U.S. House of Representatives had at that point reduced funding to a lot of the programs that played a big role in urban Americans' lives, including cutting $137 million from Head Start and cutting, effectively subtracting $5,000 from each classroom's budget and cutting 45,000 preschoolers from crucial early education programs. Also, in addition to trying to create this sort of moment of political power and the sort of consolidation of our advocacy, it was about also creating a self-sufficient unit within the black community and trying to use the event as a publicity campaign to combat the negative racial stereotypes in America. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but 1994-95 was also the time of O.J. Simpson, which was the biggest case in America. And, of course, O.J. did not do it. I proved that. You can go to my YouTube page, Scott Cannon Radio, and watch the playlist where I debunk all of the prosecution's arguments against O.J., but that's neither here nor there. The image of O.J. being this sort of criminal black man alongside with guys like Willie Horton, even Mike Tyson was just getting out of prison at that point. He had served 2.5 years for rape, which he probably also did not commit. And so there was just an overall feeling that we as black men were under attack, under siege, needed to get together, needed to coalesce and create a power center where we could come together and do something important. And so this was really a pivotal moment in Black America's history. A lot of the speakers at this this event, Al Sampson, who I actually got to talk to here at WLTH some years ago with Jonathan Booth. Jonathan and Lloyd Fisher actually brought Al Sampson in here. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to the man personally, a brilliant brother from the civil rights era, one of the elders. Also, Marion Barry spoke. He was another person whose image had taken a hit over the years. He was the mayor of Washington, D.C. He had gotten caught up in a drug scandal in the early 90s. Dr. Betty Shabazz spoke, the widow of Malcolm X. Martin Luther King III, the son of, obviously, Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Cornel West, Benjamin Chavis, Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, famously Barack Obama's minister, who he threw under the bus when it was politically convenient. And another man I've had the pleasure of meeting, Dr. Malana Karenga, or Ron Karenga, the founder of Kwanzaa. He was one of the speakers, Reverend James Bevel, and of course, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. from Rainbow Push Coalition. And so you had all of these speakers who were there to essentially give Black men a pep talk, because we had taken such a brutal beating in the years before the Million Man March happened. Now, just because Black men are trying to do something positive does not mean, and you know this is America, does not mean that there won't be skepticism, and oftentimes from our own people. Our own people. There was a lot of the Black feminists like Angela Davis and Barbara Ransby and Evelyn Hammonds and Kimberly Crenshaw, the mother of intersectionality, formed an alliance called the African American Agenda 2000 to oppose the Million Man March, because they thought that it would herald a dramatic resurgence in Black male sexism. And so, you know I don't have much time here, I only have a few minutes here, but this just goes back to, once again, another one of the problems that we have in our community. Whenever Black men try to do anything to try to be men and try to be exactly who God made us to be, there's always a sort of chorus of people, who are, ultimately trying to undermine that, including, like I said, a lot of times, Black feminists. Like I said, I understand where they're coming from, but, it's unfortunate that they couldn't let us be, have one day where we can try to get our stuff together and be the type of husbands and fathers and sons that we need to be. A lot of Black Christians, and I hate to say this because I am a Black Christian, were against it because it was led by Louis Farrakhan, and Farrakhan is a member of the Nation of Islam. There were even some who bought into the idea that Farrakhan was this horrific anti-Semitic guy and called him Adolf Hitler and compared him to Hitler. Now, a lot of people in the mainstream media, one thing in researching this, I didn't really remember this at the time, but one thing I've seen in studying this was that there were people in the media like Newsweek that actually were afraid that Farrakhan's political agenda could become a concern for the Democratic Party, as his effort to register Black men as independent voters could create a voting bloc with a mix of social conservatism, economic empowerment, and Black solidarity. And essentially, it's crazy because we have been making that same argument. Me and Jonathan, when we were on Mondays, we used to talk about this type of stuff all the time. And there's been this constant drumbeat beating us back down because we don't want to be subservient to the corporate liberal Democratic Party and the sort of, soft bigotry of a lot of white liberals. And, you know, a lot of that goes back to this, where you see whenever a black leader says we shouldn't just be in the pockets of one party, we shouldn't just be Democrats or Republicans, we should be independent and coalesce around the black community and try to create black wealth and black families. There's always a bunch of people who come out and go, no, 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 no. And usually those people are trying to steer us back into the Democratic Party. And so I think a lot of the story of the Million Man March, as I got to get out of here in about 5 minutes, is that there was a lot of great promise that came out of that march, a lot of optimism that came out of that march. But ultimately, the powers that be, the forces that feared the power and continue to fear the power of black men, were able to extinguish much of that energy. Once again, we got herded right back into the corporate, Democratic Party. And the question is, how long are we going to let them do this? How long are we just going to be one party or just partisan hacks in general? When are we going to, as a community, say that is enough, be independent, and fight for what is best for our communities above all else? That's what Farrakhan was talking about on that day. And that's what we need to be talking about right now, here in 2025, going on 2026. And so it's not good enough to honor the Million Man March and the fact that it happened. The question is, what can we learn? What can we learn and apply it to our current situation here? Not just in Gary, Indiana, or East Chicago, Indiana, or Hammond, Indiana, or South Side of Chicago. But what can we learn from this to use in our lives right now? So let me know. All right, folks, you can chop it up.